Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you're tuning in right now, you're probably a high achiever. You set those massive, ambitious goals, you put in the totally grueling hours, and you just get things done, right? But today I want to talk to you about a very specific, honestly pretty dangerous moment in your journey. It's that moment right near the tail end of a massive project. Absolute exhaustion hits you like a ton of bricks. Procrastination suddenly feels incredibly justified, and you want nothing more than to just walk away. Believe me, I've been there. And as your mentor through this material, I really want to validate that feeling. That late stage burnout, it is so real. But what if that overwhelming urge to quit isn't actually a sign that you failed? What if instead it's just the final hurdle you have to clear?
There's this brutal but honestly perfectly accurate imagery from the book The Alchemist. People die of thirst just when the palm trees have appeared on the horizon. Man, that captures a cruel pattern we see in almost any worthwhile pursuit, doesn't it? The absolute hardest, driest, most grueling stretch almost always comes right at the very end. That early excitement? Long gone. The beginner's luck has completely worn off, and you're just left staring at the horizon feeling totally empty.
So let me ask you something. Why does quitting feel the absolute most reasonable right at the finish line? It's kind of a cruel irony, isn't it? The urge to say, you know what, this just isn't working, I should stop, becomes the loudest exactly when you are the closest to your goal. Well, the answer is actually surprisingly simple. It's because absolute fatigue and the proximity to your goal arrive at the exact same moment. The sheer cost of all your effort is catching up with you right as that final, steepest incline begins. We call this whole phenomenon the final test. If you strip away all the mysticism, the psychology of it is really plain. It's literally just the moment your personal depletion meets the last steep climb before a dream is realized. Think of it like a psychological wall. The real danger here is that at this wall, your despair starts masquerading as wisdom. Your tired brain tells you, in this very calm, rational voice, that quitting is the smart, logical thing to do. But listen to me. It's not fate testing you. It's just your own empty gas tank playing tricks on you.
Now, a huge mistake high achievers make is confusing persistence with stubbornness. Grinding away at a goal that's not even yours anymore isn't grit, right? It's just sunk cost loyalty. That's what we call the wrong direction. This happens when you hit repeated dead ends or you realize the goal was totally misguided to begin with, and the thought of quitting actually brings you this huge wave of relief instead of regret. That feeling is telling you to change course, and honestly, listening to it is a sign of wisdom. But what about just plain difficulty? That's when the work is still clear, you are still on the right path, but you are just incredibly, deeply tired. That feeling? That says to keep going.
So to survive this final climb, you need a system. Here is a really tactical 5-step protocol designed specifically to override your exhaustion. First, like we just talked about, you've got to distinguish a final test from a wrong direction. Ask yourself, is the goal still yours? If the answer is yes, you move to step 2, name the test. Then, step 3, reconnect to your why, because trust me, the original reason always fades behind the fatigue. Step 4 is to shrink the challenge down to a single action. And finally, step 5, enlist your inner citadel tools to basically fortify your mind. There is just sheer power in saying this out loud. This is step 2 in action right here. When you feel that totally crushing weight of burnout, I want you to literally speak these words. This is the final stretch. The urge to quit is the test, not a verdict. By explicitly naming the pattern out loud, you strip that quit thought of its disguise. It immediately stops being this profound revelation that you should give up and goes right back to being exactly what it is. It's just a symptom of you being exhausted. Okay, so an absolutely crucial point here is how you handle the scale of the work you have left. This brings us to step 4, shrink it to the next single action. When you're facing the final test, the absolute biggest mistake you can make is staring at the whole mountain. If you zoom out and look at the entire remaining goal, you are going to feel overwhelmed and that wall will win. Don't sit there and relitigate the whole project. Just identify the one single small action directly in front of you. Just read one module. Just make one call. Just survive one single day. You cross the finish line by taking the next step, not by trying to leap up the entire staircase all at once. And finally, step 5. To really push through, you need to enlist your inner citadel tools. First up, wipe off the opinion. You have to separate the cold, hard fact, like, okay, I have 3 modules left, from the dramatic, Oscar-worthy tragedy your exhausted brain is trying to pitch you, like, I'll literally never finish this, it's impossible. Second, try the view from above. Zoom out and just imagine how tiny this one grueling week is going to look a year from now. And third is the reserve clause. This means committing entirely to the effort of pushing through, but holding the actual outcome loosely. Your job is just to put in the work, not to guarantee that the entire universe bends to your will.
Section 1. Real-world survival examples.
Let's look at a couple of examples. Consider what we call the certification trap. Say you've passed 5 out of 6 modules for a huge professional qualification. You're totally burned out, and suddenly the brain says, you know what? I've learned what I needed anyway. The certificate doesn't even really matter. That right there, that is the final test wearing a highly reasonable face. Now, let's compare that to the business trap. Imagine a founder who's been working for 2 years. Money is super tight, growth is totally flat. Well, that flat patch right before the growth curve bends upward is exactly where most people just walk away. In both academics and startups, that quit point completely disguises itself as perfectly rational logic.
So how do we actually survive these scenarios? Well, you run the protocol to bypass the panic. For the students stuck on Module 5, the goal is definitely still theirs, right? So it's just difficulty. They need to reconnect to why they started in the first place and shrink their horizon strictly to reading just 1 chapter a day. That's it. Now, for the founder, they have to ruthlessly check themselves. Is this just an unrewarded stretch of difficulty, or is the market repeatedly saying no, which would indicate a wrong direction? If it is just difficulty, they need to shrink their focus down to running just 1 more experiment.
You might be wondering, why on earth put ourselves through all this pain? Well, because when we strive to become better, everything around us becomes better. The true alchemy isn't really about turning literal lead into gold. And it isn't even just about getting that certificate or building that booming business. The real magic is that the pursuit itself transforms you. The discipline, the sharp judgment, and the absolute nerve that you forge in this agonizing final stretch, those are yours to keep forever, completely regardless of how the specific goal lands. Section 2, Finding Your Personal Law. Okay, I want you to carve out just 20 minutes today to run through a really powerful 3-step reflection. I want you to think back to a goal that you abandoned right near the finish line. First, let's analyze the pattern. How close were you really? What exactly did that little voice of the quit thought say to you? And I want you to be brutally honest here. Was it truly a wrong direction, or was it just pure difficulty? Second, look at the cost. What did quitting at that 90% mark actually cost you that quitting on day 1 wouldn't have? And finally, you need to forge your wall plan. Write out a concrete, literal sentence. When I hit the wall, I will, and then fill in the blank. For example, you could write, I will say out loud that I am at the test, restate my why, and do only the next single action for 3 days. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave a question ringing in your ears. Where in your life right now are you the closest to a goal, but also the most tempted to stop? Take a really close look at that area of your life. Is it truly a wrong direction, or is your own personal depletion just finally meeting that last steep climb? You have to remember, the urge to quit is literally always loudest right before the finish line. Please do not trust the despair. It is not a verdict, it is just the final test. So the question is, will you push through? Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.